Hi, folks. Welcome back to another EDGEy conversation. We have a staff conversation today. Really exciting to have Bronwyn and Alexandra with me this morning as we get a chance to discuss something that we've heard coming up quite a bit in some of our cohorts, some of our community spaces. And so I'm looking forward to this conversation about what is renewal. That's sort of where we're headed today. And the context for this I'll provide both for Bronwyn and Alexandra, but also for folks who are watching this later. It seems to be folks are in a place of discernment about what next. That this is coming up in a lot of communities of faith across the country to think about where to from here. And one of those big questions, or one of the things I think folks are trying to nuance out or separate into a way that they can understand, is this sense of when do we go with renewal? So when do we revitalize something that has already existed or something that is cherished and well loved in our community, versus when do we shift into starting something completely new? And I'm sure there's a bit of gray or a bit of overlap between renewing and new, but really wanting to dive into today, what does renewal mean? So that's kind of maybe where we'll start with this question for us of like, what does renewal mean to you? How does it show up for you? What does that word even make you think of? So we'll start there today in our conversation.
Thanks, Zoe. So I think, I think this is very timely, maybe always timely, but very timely right now. And a lot of people discerning renewal. I think renewal is often, like trying to go back to what was or refresh what was. I think in my understanding of renewal, though, it is an invitation to be a bit different in that. So but it's not starting something completely on its own. So I think with renewal, there is that new. It can be something a bit new and different. And I think the strength of being able to renew something is that hopefully you already have a really strong base or a really strong vision and understanding of why a community, for example, a community of faith, like why it exists and the people that are part of that. And so, but that could be expressed in a slightly new way or different way. So I think that gives you a really strong base, but that base can also be, it can be difficult to then get outside of the box of what has been and really explore the new as well. So I think that's some of the pros and cons.
Yeah, thanks so much for that, Bronwyn. I think too, like I've heard a bit in what you've just said and what I've heard from some other folks and how I'm kind of grappling with renewal in my own life is thinking too about this like particular, I don't know, cultural, political, public health moment as folks are shifting in and out of what this like post-COVID era looks like, is folks thinking about like, what does renewal mean in the sense of like, there is a sentiment, I think, of folks are tired. Like it has been a really hard 2 years for folks, or 2.5 years now, to keep up with all of these shifts and changes. And so for me, it's this question of like, how do we renew our energy? How do we renew our passion? How do we kind of find our momentum or find the spirit and follow it again? After this like period of time of, I think, just feeling really bogged down by all of the demands of like COVID and where the world is at right now. I think for renewal for me is this piece of like, what are these pieces, these values, this energy that we can tap back into that might spark something new further down the line?
Yeah, I think that hits it on the head, like a really great example of renewal as we can think of like our lives before COVID happened, and then our lives during COVID, where everyone was forced to rearrange things. And now in this moment, which is not like we're not beyond COVID or anything, but like, you know, in this moment where things are adjusting and we're recalibrating, we've had these strong urges to have the life that we had before COVID happened at the same pace and the same acceleration and same momentum, all of those sorts of things. And we're finding in this renewal moment in our lives as people and in our lives as communities that what was before in a lot of ways wasn't really a sustainable pace or wasn't really something that reflected our values. You know, a lot of people's values kind of shifted around, and we were reminded of the importance of family and connection in a different way during COVID than maybe before, when we were a little bit more focused on other aspects of life. So in thinking about renewal outside of that, it's like, okay, well, you want to make something new again, but it's also realizing what are the things that allow you to do that. In order to renew your commitment to loving books and reading 12 books, like one a month in a year, then you need to provide space and energy and the ability to do that. And part of that is also realizing what you need to take a step back from, and what things you might need to rearrange a little bit in your relationships with others in order to be able to do those things. So I often think of renewal as like, it's not necessarily like as Bronwyn was saying, it's not going back to something that was exactly, but it's figuring out, okay, what were the things that were really important before, and like at the core, community connection, love, pastoral care, connecting with like different people of different demographics in your community, or serving your community in a particular way. And like those things really becoming like the center and the core of what drives what becomes new again in your community or in your life.
Yeah, I think that's the heart of it. I think the danger of renewal, or that term is the sense that, just what you were saying, like we have to do all of what we were doing, but better. We have to do it harder and more and better and all of those things. And make it have that fresh feel, which is just like, pushing a massive boulder uphill. I think like it's really hard work. And I think that's, as like both of you have mentioned, I think people are just so tired. So the idea of even like having a big event where, that used to give us so much energy or something, like, and we get everybody together. It's funny because in my home congregation, we had this conversation a couple of months ago. We used to have this big anniversary celebration, and it was a fundraiser, and it was really life-giving at the time. But when we talked about doing it even this fall, it was like, nobody has the energy, and like, what if there's a lockdown? What if there's so many other considerations. And so it was a really interesting conversation, I think, about like, well, what would actually be renewing, right? What would actually fill our cup at the moment? And I hate to say it, because it's not like, it wasn't actually an external focus, but for us, it was actually like, maybe we just need to have like a dinner, like a smaller dinner. Anybody is of course welcome, but like not have the big fundraiser, not have the big event and the big party and the big splash, and like just have like family style dinner kind of thing. And like everything, the tickets are a bit cheaper and the food is a little less fancy and like stuff. But the sense was that it would really just help us renew our bonds and reconnect in that family setting that Alexandra mentioned, right? Like sort of reconnect in that sense. And so I think that's it's also like tough conversations. I think renewal does involve that, because you do have to not do some things, and to make sure that you have the space, as you say, for the reading, or the space to do other things.
Yeah, I think this is so lovely, this like hearing this sense of like what is starting something again versus what is starting something over or starting something new. And I guess this is where my next question kind of leads us. And I've heard it, both of you say it kind of in various ways already, but this sense of like, how do we like harvest or tap into the things that let us move into renewal? Like, how do we tap into this place where we've got this energy again? And what does that look like to find that? And so like, I really hear you, Bronwyn, about like maybe something a little bit smaller, a little bit more intimate, feeling a little bit more connected or like grounded into here and now is part of renewal, is like resetting this stable foundation. And I think that's certainly coming up for me a lot. And I'm hearing it in other places as well. This sense of like COVID and our very digital world, which has offered us lots and been very generative in some ways, also kind of has this like destabilizing effect where we are like losing this sense of like groundedness in place and time and in our actual community and with our actual neighbors. And is that such a big piece of renewal? Like, how do we really harvest or ground into that as our starting point?
I think that's a really good question, Zoe. My first inclination is to say to go into, prayer and to like try to discern as a community. But I think one of the challenges of this particular time is that as individuals, maybe we don't even know how to articulate what it is, those things that we need or want or strive for or are hopeful of in our community, because everything has been so destabilized, or because things have changed so much. And, the person who is in charge of this ministry has passed away or has moved on or is not coming back to church, or, like all of these different possibilities. And so when trying to figure out what are the what would our personal interests be, like they wouldn't necessarily fit the same sorts of categories that existed before. And I'm also finding that because people changed the way that they physically traveled and moved around spaces, and I don't mean long distance, I mean like within our community, like a lot of people, their commute to work changed, or the way in which they manage their kids going to and from school changed, or all of these sorts of things. And so with the reintroduction of a lot of those things over the past few months, like it's been quite overwhelming to realize, oh wow, like a lot of my time is spent kind of in transit. And so what does that mean in terms of how I want to spend time at my end destination? And how do I want to participate, or how can I arrive there and just not be stressed from being in traffic or something like that? So I definitely feel as though like it's harder right now than it has been to like send out a survey to a congregation and say, what is it that you're seeking or needing? Because we don't really know how to say what it is. That's not to be a deterrent by any means to say that we can't go into those conversations and try to figure it out. But yeah, I'm realizing that might be part of the barrier, or part of the challenge in figuring out how to even consider what renewal could look like.
I think what's so great about this moment is that I'd like to say more of us are trying to listen to those, that's little voices, right? Following that energy. That sounded weird, little voices. The small quiet voice of God in our lives and in our spirits. But like I think hopefully it's also that practice of discernment is entering in, and how we, I know as a team, we often talk about like, where's the energy, and trying to actually wrestle out like why something is energizing or life-giving and stuff, and like, therefore, yes, let's do it. And are there elements of like a project or a ministry or something that really are not life-giving, and is there any way those can be adjusted or switched, or we can find a new partner to help with something, or so I think that's a really great invitation at the moment. I do think is, again, that discernment does take a certain amount of energy even in itself, and I'm just conscious of the communities of faith I've spoken to in the last a few weeks or a month or two and stuff that almost don't even have the energy for those conversations. And so it does, I think, really that grounding piece that's been mentioned, and the rooting in the faith, and not rushing for the answer about what's going to renew, I think is also critical. Not because I think there is a pressure to like do it all right away. We're back. And then, realizing we're really not, like, we're just not in the same place. And so yeah. So discernment, I think that's a really key spiritual practice at the moment.
Yeah, Bronwyn, I just want to like pull out too what really stood out for me, what you just said, this sense of like, if we are encountering something that's not life-giving, or that we're not feeling like it has lots of energy, instead of like throwing the baby out with the bathwater and kind of abandoning it altogether, this like really gentle question of like, what would need to shift for it to start feeling life-giving? And I think that's so nice because it like opens up this big space of like freedom. It offers lots of permission to then be like, okay, within this thing, what are the pieces that could become life-giving again? And what little things might we move? And I think this is also like this, I can tie this back to the earlier conversation. This is the part that like might give us permission to, dare I say it, go a little bit smaller. Like this is permission to take some of the pressure off, to say like, okay, it feels like we're in a moment where everyone needs a bit of a pause. Everyone needs to take a big collective breath together. And not just in the sense of like finding some slowness, but also in the sense of like, can I hear my neighbors also breathing? Like, do I remember that we are connected by our breath? Do I remember that we are all in this moment together, grappling in this place together? And what energy might be found if I remember that this is a collective project that we're all working towards or working on, versus feeling like I am alone and having to renew or revitalize my whole community of faith or my whole region. This sense of like we are all contributing kind of to this little piece. And then I think this then leads me into this kind of last place for exploration today. So we're coming up towards the end of the year, and lots of great renewal has happened. We've had a front row seat to it. So this kind of question or exploration, like, what is the joy that we have witnessed or that we know in our own lives around renewal and the possibility of renewal, and what energy might be found in that? And I think for me, like that's been certainly witnessed throughout some of our cohorts, in particular in Curiosity cohort, like this, I want to call it like vicarious joy. Like folks come back to Curiosity cohort and they've got stories of ways that they have engaged or shifted little things in their communities of faith or in their discerning practice. And it's incredible how much even just hearing them share that impacts the whole group, and kind of broadens our whole horizon around like what is possible in renewal and feeling renewed, vicariously renewed maybe, by knowing about other people's stories and experiences of renewal. And I think that has been so key. So I think for me, that's a big piece, is like share your experiences of renewal, no matter how big or small, because we are all vicariously encouraged and impacted by those.
Absolutely. I think for myself, one of the biggest joys that's come over the last little while is like I moved during COVID. And so like after moving, I haven't yet found like a church that I want to like really ground myself in the community of. But that's been a kind of a gift, because I've been going to different churches and being reminded through different styles of worship and through different styles of liturgy and different people speaking of the things that I really am seeking in my connection with other people and in my connection with God. And I think it's also interesting on the flip side to see how these different communities respond to someone who's not part of their community coming in as a drop-in, and seeing kind of the like, oh, okay, maybe we do that. Maybe that's a little bit much, or maybe like, you know, it's great that we're inviting people to like these things that are happening outside of Sunday worship. But it's just been incredibly kind of renewing for me to be reminded of like what are the reasons why I want to be part of a community. And I do hope at some point I find one that really like, you know, grips me. But that also there are some things that are gifts of different congregations, and the Spirit is moving through us and through our community. And sometimes like that congregational boundary ends up being a little bit firm. So just remember that, you know, you're part of a wider church in a wider space, and that it's probably a good thing, you know, once in a while to just kind of drop into a church or a congregation or a service or an activity happening somewhere else, and see how that just kind of speaks to your soul, or if it doesn't. And, you know, all of that provides interesting information for what renewal might mean for you moving forward.
Yeah, I think I was thinking of an example of a congregation that I was that we worked with EDGEy, where over the pandemic they actually welcomed a couple of new members that weren't local. So like because they were meeting online, they had some members that did attend and then connected, and really actually invited those people into leadership roles within their community. So there was a real sense of welcome and I think an openness to redefining even what a membership looks like, right? Like these are people that probably will never attend in person, but are very connected and helping, like, you know, one's on the board and one's engaged and stuff. So so I just think that is an interesting to sort of reiterate, I guess, is like that being open to redefining some of these things too, and that can be a little bit scary, but also in that learning new possibilities. And what I was struck by is in the particular example was really great ideas came from, in this case, from those individuals about how to do some of the stuff online and how to be a stretched out community, I'll say. I don't know if that's the term they'd use, but it was but yeah, and really a lot of people then benefited and felt renewed through some of those new initiatives that it would have been almost impossible for the community itself to think of as they had stood before the pandemic. So yeah, I think that openness is really crucial, and not that every new idea is a great idea, and not that every you know, if it makes you uncomfortable, it's not necessarily the place you're going to worship, but it is just being a little bit open to like getting out of that comfort zone and seeing if there is something there that really does work for you too.
Wonderful. Amazing. Thank you so much, Alexandra and Bronwyn, for your reflections today, and kind of engaging with this sense of what is renewal? How does it show up? How do we move with it? How do we move around it? We hope that this maybe will spark some curiosity for you around what renewal looks like in your own life and in your communities of faith. And as always, we would love to hear those stories. So you're welcome to reach out to us, tell us your stories of renewal, and share in kind of a mutually inspiring space around how we move through this particular moment in time and in history. We'll have one more staff EDGEy conversation in December, and then that will be a wrap on EDGEy staff conversations for 2022. Grateful as always for all of our teammates who come together to have these conversations, and all the folks who engage with them later on their own time. So from all of us at EDGEy, thank you, and we'll see you next month.